This is the Pastor Podcast with Randy and Andy. Andy Payton is the lead pastor at Methodist Temple United Methodist Church in Evansville, Indiana. Randy Moore is associate pastor at Methodist Temple. Their goal is to see Christ in everything and everyone.
Welcome into the podcast, everybody. It's so good to have you with us. I'm Pastor Randy Moore, joined by Pastor Andy Payton. How you doing, Pastor Andy?
Doing well. It's good to be with you as always, Randy.
Yeah. Hey, we're still in the Easter season. We pastors like to remind folks of that because if you think about when Easter Sunday was, it seems like a long time ago, and Easter comes and goes for many. But for us, it's a season. It's 50 days, and we're still in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great time to reflect theologically on what I would describe as the promise of Easter, which is like the ultimate shortcut for us as Christians when it comes to understanding who God is, what God is up to. And that's why it's so important that you stick with it, because if you just come for like one Easter Sunday morning worship service and then go home, okay, great. You know, that's not the point though. The point is that Easter is meant to create a sense of transformation in our lives and in our communities.
We like to do a soul check-in, and Easter, this season of Easter is good for the soul.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about my soul, the question I find myself asking right now, Randy, is like, where am I in alignment with God's love and presence? Or the flip side, where am I out of alignment with God's love and presence? In terms of alignment in my own life, certainly I think about taking care of my kids and my family, and then also the other day I was at the Immigration Welcome Center with Ellie, and learned a little bit about what we're doing for the immigrants in our community. And I felt very much aligned with God's presence in that conversation with Allie, even though it was a heavy conversation.
Absolutely. We were talking Sunday after the service about the podcast, and you mentioned, what we're going to be going over can sort of seem like it's ground that we plowed over and over again. But I don't know that this love commandment that we're going to talk about here, which was the basis for your sermon, I don't know that you could ever say it too much. I mean, if we just got this part of it, love one another, I mean, there you go.
Well, the gospel is love, in a nutshell. And so we can talk theologically, we can reflect doctrinally, we can go over all these Bible stories and, do all these things. But if we have not love, we've missed the point of Christianity. And so you're right. I don't think we can hit it enough. And I think it's interesting that we read this lesson on Maundy Thursday, which is, of course, during Holy Week. But then the Christian tradition, the church, has us read it again because there's this emphasis here where don't miss this point. It's very important.
Yeah, so why don't I go ahead and read it. This is from the Gospel of John, from the farewell discourse of Jesus. And Jesus sometimes I think we overlook this. I mean, Jesus really is concerned about his disciples and what his death and his going away is going to do to them. And so he so tenderly prepares them for this very real departure that's about to happen. So it begins 13:31 in John. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Didn't say it one time, 2 times, 3 times.
Over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there it is. As you said, that is the gospel.
I didn't get to talk about much in my sermon, but in the passages leading into the love stuff, there are some big statements being made by Jesus. And I'll just throw this out. Really, if you really think about these passages leading into the love commandment, Christ is making like a metaphysical claim that God is glorified in Jesus. Okay, we hear that and we're, oh yeah, that's good. Well, don't miss this, because really what Jesus is saying is like, he is the embodiment of ultimate reality, God himself. He's the embodiment of life itself. And so when we talk about go and love one another, it's not just like good advice. No. This is like, if you get this, if we get this, we flourish. If we miss this, we perish and life falls apart. And so I know I'm probably guilty of over-theologizing at times, but I have to throw this out because it's so important that Christianity begins with a metaphysical statement. Metaphysical is kind of a big word, I know. So what are we saying? Well, at the baseline core reality is the God who is love itself. And so when we move with that love, we're moving with God and reality itself. And if we go against that love, we're going against reality itself. This is much more than just some sort of ethical advice. And I just throw that out because I didn't get a chance to talk about it in my sermon. I was crunched for time. And so when we hear that glorifying, God's glorified in Christ business and, Jesus and the Father are one and these kinds of things, this is much more than just like flowery poetry or language. Like this is making a big point.
And this speaks to why we do the podcast, because you didn't have time for that then, but you have time for it now.
Yeah.
So that's good. You started with a story about Lee Hamilton, and a long-time congressman here in the state of Indiana. Share that story.
You've probably met him.
Oh,
though.
yeah.
You probably know Lee.
Yeah.
So his brother Dick was actually a pastor here at Methodist Temple back in the day. His father was a pastor at Trinity Methodist Church here in Evansville also. Lee, of course, didn't go that route. He became an attorney, and then later he was elected to the 9th Congressional District, which includes Evansville. And he was elected, I guess, in 1965 and served until 1999. Now, just think about what he saw in that period of time. He was in Congress during the Vietnam War. He would have been in Congress during Watergate. He would have sat in Ronald Reagan's office. Just think about the history there. But he met with some pastors and I was in that group too, obviously, as a pastor, but he met with us pastors, and he was talking about leadership, though, a few years back. And the thing I took away from the conversation was his approach to dealing with problems. And when he would encounter some sort of challenge, his staff would even make fun of him because it was always the same question. What are the facts? Give me the facts, and then we can proceed from there. And I like that question. It's a helpful one. It's a challenging one in our world today, obviously, because you think about Lee, he's asking this question during Ronald Reagan's administration, where that was a time period where, by and large, people could agree on the facts. In our context today, that's not the case. I mean, we have competing facts and competing opinions, and a lot of it has to do with the way that we process our media now and consume our media now. And so you can go find whatever fact you want to affirm your reality. It's a challenging situation, but I still like the question. And the question I ask as a pastor, of course, then becomes, well, how do you apply that to our faith? What are the facts? Well, the facts are, there's a lot we can't prove. I can't prove certain things in the Bible were literally and factually true. That might be disconcerting to some people, unsettling to some people, but let's own it. I don't have a recording of Noah and the ark. You don't either. and so what are the facts? Well, I would just maintain this. The fact is our lives work best in a Christ-like way. I think that's almost a verifiable type of fact. When we go with it, we're going with life itself. When we go against it, things seem to fall apart. And so we've kind of come full circle now where we're talking again about this metaphysical idea of God's presence running throughout all reality.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, the gospel applies to what you're talking about there, because in the gospel is where we get the song, "They will know we are Christians by our love."
Yes. It's almost a cliche now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And it becomes very important. If this idea of love is so important, then how do we define love, right? Like, what is it? Because the truth is, in the current context we find ourselves in, love basically can become code for do whatever you want, do whatever you like. And if you step in front of that, you challenge someone on that, they'll say, hey, you have to love me. well, no, that's not necessarily Christian love. And so that becomes more and more apparent when you begin to break down the different words that the Greeks used for love. Greek is the language that the New Testament was written in, so it becomes important to really get down to it. What's the word that Jesus used for love? Well, the word Jesus uses is agape, and that's over and against some of the other words he could have used. Some of the other words in the Greek language for love include like philia, which is where we get the city name Philadelphia. It refers to brotherly love or friendship. Another word that the Greeks had for love was storge, which is family type love, like the love a parent has for a child, these kinds of things. Another word the Greeks had for love is the one that probably comes to mind for most people in our current context when we think about love is eros. That's where we get the English word erotic. And so that points to romantic love. Interestingly enough, though, when I was studying eros, there was one scholar that said that there were some occasions where eros was used to describe political fanaticism too.
Huh.
So eros is kind of like pointing to this form of love. It's like burning with
I was going to
passion.
say it's red hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the ancients would talk about eros in terms of the most dangerous one too. It'll burn you. When you get burning with passion, it can take you to some unproductive places and in multiple ways. But the word Jesus uses is agape. So what's that? Well, impartial love. It's given to all. There's no limit. This is the one that's most reflective of God's love. Probably one of the clearest expressions of it would be obviously Christ on the cross is an example of agape love. Christ dies for the world, gives his life for the world. That's agape love. Another example would be in the Sermon on the Mount, which is where we as Methodists and Wesleyans get that perfection language. In the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, Jesus says basically, you have heard that it is said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But Jesus goes on to say, I say unto you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you will be children of your Father in heaven, who sends the sun and the rain on both the just and the unjust. So just think about that for a moment. It's interesting because the word for love that Jesus uses in that Matthew context, agape, is the very same word that he uses in our lesson for today, agape. And so what do we learn here? Well, agape love is love that's given to all. Just like God's love is given to all, as people who are Christian, we give our love to all, which is not just a warm and fluffy feeling. It's an action. We live for the goodwill of all. That's Christian love. And that's a challenging form of love, really, if you stop and think about it, And without agape, I would argue, basically what happens is some of these lesser loves that I mentioned, they go unchecked, and we become kind of tribal in the way that we love. And so we just love our friends, or we just love our family, or we'll just love our own personal preferences or choices, or, some ways our own politics becomes number one. Without that agape love, where we have an understanding that God's love is poured out for everyone, things can go awry. I mean, big time.
Yeah. I thought it was very helpful when you talked about ego and loud ego and quiet ego.
Yeah. I got some of that from an article I read. I think it was in the Atlantic. Again, this is why we do the podcast. Sometimes I don't have a time to kind of lay all that out. But the author makes the point, we live in a world where we have loud egos, right? That's pretty obvious. Everyone's kind of shouting at one another, this is what I want, this is what I desire. And yet it is, the more and more we have focused on our ego in this way, our own personal wants, desires, those kinds of things, study after study has shown we don't become happier. The fact is, we are a culture that is increasingly becoming anxious and depressed. The fact is, we live in a time where the world, it seems like we're moving farther and farther apart. And so what's the remedy? Well, the remedy, instead of a loud ego, is we quiet our egos. What's that mean? Well, I think that's really kind of what Jesus was talking about when he talked about agape. A quiet ego is not like you erase yourself. You maintain a sense of yourself. And so you have your friends, you have your family, you have your personal likes and dislikes. Yeah, I mean, you're still a human being, right? I mean, you exist. But what a quiet ego does is we maintain our sense of self, but we are able and willing to incorporate others into that picture. And so we use the gifts that we've been given then for the goodwill of others. That's a quiet ego. And the thing that the author makes, the point the author makes, is a quiet ego that uses one's gifts to serve the goodwill of others. They find happiness. And the same is true for, as Christians. We talk about the happy life is a holy life. The happy life is an agape life. Why? Well, again, it's this idea that's who we are created to be. And so we're offering our gifts to others. And it's this idea of a quiet ego, which is helpful to me because there are some circles within Christianity where we almost get this sense where we need to annihilate ourselves. Mm-hmm. No. I mean, the quiet ego idea says we are created in the image of God. We are children of God. We have personalities. We're not robots. But the invitation of the gospel is to use the gifts that God has given us for the goodwill of all. And then we become reflectors of the love that made us and fashioned us.
Mm-hmm. You illustrated this then with a story about our friend and fellow pastor Jerry Reardon, who's retired but worships here.
Well, he's a perfect example of a quiet ego.
Yeah.
He got mad at me for naming him at my sermon. He was like, "Oh, Andy, stop." Jerry's a retired United Methodist pastor, and one thing I'll say about most pastors is that, especially once we retire, we're happy just to sit in the back row and be an encourager for others. And Jerry's definitely done that. He retired a few years ago from serving in the United Methodist Church, and then he took a job at Wesselman Woods where he works in the Department of Development. Mm-hmm. He's a
fundraiser.
He's a fundraiser. Yeah. So that's something we pastors do sometimes too. But he sent me a podcast from Freakonomics about how to fail well. Mm-hmm. How to navigate failure. And he said, if I was preaching today, this is what I'd be talking about. And I, paid attention to that.
Sure.
If Jerry's going to say this, right. I'm going to pay attention. And it's a great podcast because it talks of it. The whole podcast itself is like an hour long, and the first half of the podcast talks about how that the big catastrophes that happen in our world today don't just happen because like one person made a mistake. Really what happens is like there's a series of failures that go into major catastrophes. And so the tendency of our culture is to find like the sharp edge, and we can blame someone. It's their fault that this happened. Well, no, actually, there were probably like 15 or 16 failures that led to this one moment where this awful thing happened. And there's all kinds of examples of things like that, where I think one of the examples in the podcast was the fire in Lahaina in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. The tendency is just to blame it all on the firefighters.
Right.
But the firefighters would have been there, then this wouldn't have happened. Well, it's not that simple. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of other factors that went into this catastrophe. But the story that really impacted me, though, was of a young man by the name of Aaron Stark, and he calls himself a school shooter.
Who never shot at a school.
Never shot at a school, right. Mm-hmm. And he grew up in an abusive home, mm-hmm. and he had an awful, awful home life. And as a result, in his words, as a result of what had happened to him, he thought, I'll become a school shooter to get back at my parents for creating me. Mm. It's heavy. And so he bought a gun. He had a plan. And then in the midst of that, another child noticed him, paid attention to him, invited him to come home, have lunch, noticed his shirt was kind of worn and dirty, offered him a shirt. And it was that basic act of kindness and noticing that Aaron Stark says it changed the course of his life. He felt like he was valuable. And I just think, what a moment, right? And so now Aaron Stark, he has a TED Talk. He goes out, he has a TED Talk. He also goes out and is a public speaker, and he shares his story. Mm-hmm. And his big point is if you go into any school and you ask the kids, who are the kids that are struggling? They can tell you. They can tell you who's anxious. They can tell you who struggled with depression. They can tell you the kid that has the tough home life. They can tell you the kid that doesn't have friends. They can tell you. You ask the kids, they know. The challenge is so often, though, nothing happens beyond that. They know the problem, but they don't make that next thing, take that next step. And we don't need to just pick on elementary schools here or children. Those children are a microcosm of the greater culture, right? I mean,
sure.
Kids don't just come up with stuff willy-nilly. Mm-hmm. They are learning, and they're seeing this in the broader culture. And so the challenge becomes then to notice, right? Yeah. And to make that this idea of agape, to take that agape type of step where we, instead of a loud ego where we try to demand our wants and desires upon the world, we quiet our egos, look around, think, how can I make it better? Mm-hmm. And
indirectly, when you were talking, I was thinking about our children, not our children, our
right.
biological children, our children here at church, and that while we don't directly train them to do that kind of thing, that's what we're training them to do, is to be that person that notices and does something about it. Yeah.
We're teaching the gospel in our lives as parents and grandparents and churches.
Mm-hmm. Wow, because you can make a difference.
Oh, tremendously.
Mm-hmm. So agape is the way, and the gospel, not just some good idea, for the salvation of the world. And you added for the healing of the world. And I've come to so appreciate salvation as healing.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, Randy, in our tradition, basically what this sermon is, in the Methodist tradition, is that this sermon basically is what we call a holiness sermon. And I've been thinking about this lately because I'm working on a devotional, and so I'm up to the Holy Spirit now, and I'm thinking...
Not one devotional.
No, it's a devotional based upon the 25 Articles of Religion of the Methodist Church. But and I'm working through it. I'm very excited. I think we're going to be able to finish it up. Sometime this year we'll get there. But we are part of the holiness tradition, though, and this is something that doesn't get talked about very much in United Methodist circles.
No,
I mean, I didn't hear much about it.
Well, holier than thou is what you think of. And the last thing we want to be is holier than thou.
Judgmental.
Yeah.
But that's not what holiness is.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It's a very positive term. Mm-hmm. The way I would describe holiness is like awareness of and response to the moral energy of God's love in our lives as defined in Christ. The awareness of, the response to the moral energy of God's love at work in our lives. And so that's what we're trying to get at. And so that basic experience of saying yes to the God's nudge in our lives, this idea of agape, is really what we're doing. I mean, that's the practice of the gospel, right? That's it. And that's what we're here to proclaim. I mean, that's what made the Methodist Church great at one point, was our mission, if you use John Wesley's language, was to spread what he called scriptural holiness all across the land. Well, I mean, that's churchy language, right? But what's he doing? He's going out and he's challenging the world to live by agape love for the sake of the world, for the salvation of the world. And that's the mission of the church today, is to challenge people to live in that agape way, but then circle back around and say, notice the difference that makes. And there's a reason for that. The reason why when we live in an agape way, we experience fulfillment, a sense of satisfaction, peace, happiness. The reason why we experience that stuff when we're out serving our neighbors and giving our lives over to other people is because that's precisely who God's created us to be.
Yeah.
There's a reason. Mm-hmm. And that's holiness. It's a very, very positive word. And this is what that was. That's a holiness sermon, although I never use that term, right? I mean, yeah. And I'm excited about the idea of holiness. I think it would be good for us to circle back around as Methodists and think about what that might mean for us in our congregations today. So, yeah.
It was a good sermon, and friends, if you'd like to go back and listen to it, watch it, you can get it on our website at Methodist Temple. So I don't think we've ever mentioned that as we've talked about,
Right.
breaking down the sermon in the podcast, but you can actually go back and see it and
Right.
listen to it and check out the website. Okay, excellent. This week is still in Easter, and the text is from Revelation. You call this Easter 6.0. So let me read the text, and you can give us a short preview of this coming Sunday. So it's Revelation 21, 1-7, very familiar text. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his peoples. And God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away." And the one who was seated on the throne said, "See, I'm making all things new." Also he said, "Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true." Then he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water as a gift from the spring of the water of life. Those who conquer will inherit these things, and I will be their God, and they will be my children." Wow.
That's a great text, isn't it?
It is.
The reason I chose it is because I think it's a helpful image in terms of, okay, we've been talking a lot about Easter, but where is it all going?
Mm-hmm.
This is the end in mind. Like, here you go. I mean, this is kind of what we're looking at. This is the image we're going to use. The place that God's taking us is like a city where God's at home with us. Mm-hmm. And writers have used this image to talk a lot about like heaven and hell, what that looks like. Mm-hmm. C.S. Lewis, if you want to read a great book, read C.S. Lewis's book, The Great Divorce, mm-hmm. where he kind of lays out an image of heaven and hell. And it's like, and kind of like what this is in Revelation. It's like a city. Well, it's interesting to think about, okay, so what does that teach us? Well, Lewis's image of hell is that hell is like a city where people are growing farther and farther and farther apart. Mm-hmm. Hell is a lot like our world today, mm-hmm. where people are divided and we're growing farther and farther apart. Mm-hmm. The flip side of it,
hell is real.
It's real. I mean, and that's my argument. I said, people will say, "Do you even believe in hell?" Absolutely. I see it every day. You know, I mean, you can watch it. It's on display. This is what happens when people get out of tune with reality itself. Now, the flip side, interestingly enough, is heaven's the opposite. Instead of a city that moves farther and farther away, heaven is a city that moves closer and closer and closer together. Mm-hmm. And I'm probably going too far now, but I'll just keep going. So I came across this idea. Have you ever heard of Zeno's paradox?
No.
So Zeno was a Greek philosopher, and his paradox was you take any 2 points and you divide the distance between them by 2, and you can continue that for an infinity. So a foot divided by 2 is like 6 inches. Divided by 2 is 3. Divided by and you can keep going smaller and smaller together. Mm-hmm. And so you can grow closer and closer together in an infinite way. Mm-hmm. That's heaven. That's heaven. I mean, it's perfect.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, and then the opposite can happen too, right? Hell. Mm-hmm. You can go farther and farther apart for an infinity as well, where you basically become your own island and you're all alone. Or you can go the other direction. You go closer to closer together. Well, this closer and closer together business is this whole podcast today, agape. Mm-hmm. How can you move closer? How can you move closer? Mm-hmm. And then the new heaven, new earth is where kind of that image comes from.
Great.
It's good stuff. I'm excited about it because it's so practical.
Mm-hmm.
My gosh, so relevant.
And that's this Sunday's sermon here at the Methodist Temple in Evansville. And we'd love to see you. I mean, if you don't have a church home and you're looking around, come see us. We worship traditionally at 8:30, and then contemporary services at 11. You can worship with us virtually, and we just appreciate the fact that you're listening to our podcast. Thank you for doing that, and we'll talk to you again next week, not before.
This has been the Pastor Podcast with Randy and Andy. You are welcome to join us at Methodist Temple in person or online. Methodist Temple is at 2109 Lincoln Avenue in Evansville, Indiana. Our traditional Sunday morning worship service is at 8:30 with our contemporary service at 11. Log on to our website at methodisttemple.church. We see Christ in you.